Thank you for being here. We're going to have a very philosophical discussion on today's Indy Art Show.
My favorite kind of discussion.
It's the meaning of life and why we're all here. And we're going to answer those questions for you if you're wondering. Because we know the answers. We're so smart.
Because we know the answers.
We're just geniuses over here, the Indy Art Show.
We're just tuned in.
You know, I was at Woodstock in '69.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, actually, I was coming back from a camping trip with my dad, and we were in the VW bus, and we got stuck in traffic in front of Yasgur's farm.
Oh, wow.
It was so embarrassing. My father rolled down the window and yelled at some of these kids going about their long hair. And I was just like slinking into the seat going, oh no. And, you know, it was like, he was like, you hippie and all this stuff. And
oh, are you going to do your dance, Roger? Should I put the camera on you? Or are you tired?
I'll do this dance. I'll do the sitting in the seat dance.
You get the B dance, not the A dance.
There it is. Like that.
All right.
Word.
How long do we have to do this dance?
Oh, you don't have to do it very long.
Am I done?
You're done.
Oh, good.
We want you to relax so you can perform for the exactly.
Okay, exact performance.
Exactly nightclub.
Yep.
So
Word.
I'm really amazed because I learned about the meaning of life and why we're all here after talking to Darren and Roger because they know the answers. And so now we know art will answer all these questions. This is the purpose of art, is to find out why we're all here. And
yes, it goes a long way.
Did you guys decide, is there a God? Or are you still thinking about it, trying to figure out the answer?
I have 3 theories.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, let's hear the 3 theories. One?
I guess the one side is the word God is confusing because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So that's the first kind of problem. Because what does one mean when one says God? Right? Language is difficult because in English, there's a people who made English and then had an idea, who may have gone across the seas or met a different culture, and then they explain something. They were like, oh, you mean God? I don't know. What do you mean God? So there's a thing that we made up to mean a thing, and does that exist? Not so sure. Not sure. Is there an actual thing that the term God is referring to that we may not understand? Probably. That I do think. And then what do I think that is? My overall theory is that everything is holographic. As above, so below. It all kind of echoes each other. You can find
like a parallel universe?
In part. There's mirrors of every system in every other thing. So in the same way that like we're having a conversation and you're Maria and Roger and I'm Darren, we have our names, we know our history, all that kind of stuff. There's things inside of us doing things. Like we're not one thing, we're a bunch of little things doing stuff, right? And those things have lives, they have their cells, they have nucleus, it's a brain, they're conscious on some level. I'm not telling it to do it, it's just doing its thing. But does like the cell in my nail know its name? Does it care? Does it matter to it? Right? Does my stomach know its name is Darren? I don't know. But if I'm hungry and something's telling me, hey, you should probably feed me.
What's your relationship like with your toe? Your big toe?
It depends on the day. Most of the times they're cool, but sometimes they're like, you know what? It's hot. I need you to stop putting stuff on me.
Okay. You know? Roger, what's your relationship like with your big?
With my big toe?
Yes.
I soak it often.
Oh, with Epsom salts?
Oh, Epsom salts and baking soda and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's good.
That's an important question of the big toe situation. And then Roger, is there a God?
I'm working on a film about that. Actually, I got a 20-minute screenplay called Quantum Cat.
Quantum Cat.
Yeah, and it's about basically it's centered at the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, in which the God particle was discovered.
Higgs boson.
Yeah, right. Well, it actually turns out that humanity has inadvertently imprisoned God in the process, and it's up to this lab rat and his assistant to try to and the Quantum Cat, which is actually Dinger, to save humanity from itself.
I like it.
Oh,
Yeah.
me too.
I like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So basically, unfortunately, there's a bunch of mishaps, and before you know it, the lab is filled with so many gods, it turns into like kind of an insane asylum,
Oh,
and they have to use a tachyonic telephone to basically call themselves in the past to tell them to sabotage the machine so that they don't imprison God. And that's, of course, when we had the breakdown with the Large Hadron Collider for a couple of years.
I like that.
Yeah.
Shyamalan-esque twist.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. But
Good.
all very cartoony.
so when will we get a chance to see this?
I have some postings on Facebook already of the beginning of the story reel.
So if we go to Roger Scott on Facebook, we can.
Yeah,
watch
there's
that there.
a Quantum Cat page, and it's
Oh.
cat is
Quantum.
spelled QAT.
It's funny
Cute.
because I saw that. I didn't know how deep it was. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So that's my opinion on God.
Okay, but I'm still confused. But okay.
That's about right. Yeah.
It exists in the same way that you exist to connect with your body. So you don't really know how all this stuff works. Your body, you do things. Your body communicates within upwards.
I mean, we create meaning.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what we do. We create meaning, and all of these meanings, they're all. I mean, we fight over these mythologies.
This is true.
Yeah.
We kill each other over these mythologies, and they're just simply, meanings that we're creating.
Mhm.
And and I mean, I'm sure that if the Incans had a god, it was probably something that visited them.
Yeah. I think that's actually really interesting because art has had this. Art and history are two things that are completely intermingled.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because all we have is like old representations of things that people they knew enough about what they were doing to make something.
They experienced something,
right?
And
now we're trying to like reinterpret it through what we know now to then go, what were they doing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So like
it's big business, I mean,
yeah.
Ancient Aliens. There
Right.
you go.
That guy is amazing.
That's too funny.
He makes me laugh every time.
I know.
See him.
It's amusing.
But it's very probable that there were, I don't know, something. If you knew nothing about all of the stuff that we have in here now, you got shot back 1,000 years and you saw stuff like, I don't know, lights in the sky, you just be like, that looks like fire. It's in the sky. I don't know.
Well, yeah,
there's
lots of descriptions about, those kinds of events and interpreting them as supernatural events.
Right. Have you seen the old Renaissance paintings? There's like a bunch of them that have things that look like flying saucers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting for me.
Yeah.
Like old art and are like the curiosities that pop up in them. There's like those old Teotihuacan? It's in like South America. There's representational art from like every culture, from Japan and like middle or early Europe, Africa, and it's like, how did all of this get here? Does this make sense?
Interesting. So are we all gods then?
I mean, depends on what you.
That's what the Bible says.
Does it?
It does, doesn't it?
I thought there was an old man with a beard.
No, there was they talk about they talk about themselves as multiples in Genesis.
This is true. A couple times actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the original text
making
English,
men in our
image. Yeah.
There you go.
There's older stories too that that mirror that.
Oh, absolutely. On many different cultures.
Yep.
And so, I mean, and the idea, what is it? Is it Panspermia or something like that? It's the idea that life is everywhere in the universe.
Right.
So do we live forever? What happens after we die, after our bodies die?
Pretty bad, smelly. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it just rots away. But what about the spirit? Does it go up to heaven or hell? Or?
I don't know. I think about that sometimes too, actually. And I don't know if I believe in the old idea of death. Like, I don't think we're humans that have spiritual experiences. I think we're having human experience now. So like this physical thing we're doing is more of a dream than it is.
A lot of the older cultures
reality.
talk about it as crossing over.
Yeah.
Right. It's seen as a transformation, not necessarily an end
and
point.
into things. Right.
Yeah. And now what that may mean in terms of consciousness, ego consciousness.
Yeah.
Well, who knows?
Yeah. Well,
this energy never dies, right?
Yeah, only transfers states.
Right.
And if everything is energy, right?
Mhm.
That means there's no real separation, only like, differences in frequency at some level.
Well, the idea that you were talking about, that we're all made up of tiny little parts. I mean, the thought that
Yeah.
we're atoms,
Yeah.
and that we're
Mhm.
mostly empty
Empty
space.
space, right.
That's bizarre.
Or if,
I mean,
Yeah.
if
but-
you talk to quantum
uh,
physics, they're not even sure if that's the case because atoms aren't really a thing. As
Right,
it might be a
right.
wave or it might be a
Huh.
particle, but it depends on your observation of it,
Yeah,
whether it's one or the other.
Yeah.
It's Heisenberg as well.
Yeah.
It's in,
And our-
you know, it's
Our
like you can't-
observation, yeah, is
You
like
can't know both. You can't know both the position
Mhm.
or the speed or something like that of
Right.
an object at the same time.
Hmm.
huh,
Right? So you can know one or the other, but
Right.
not both.
interesting.
Yeah.
There's
that's
a
Oh.
variable of our understanding inside of whatever we try to measure, so it kind of makes it hard to. There's always a wall you hit.
Uh-huh.
Like you
Mhm.
can never look at your own eyeball. You can't do that. You can look at a reflection of it,
Yeah,
right? You can't
Right.
see the back of your own head. It's not a thing. You can't bite your own teeth. It's not.
yeah. The reflection's not accurate, and the
Mm.
sound of our voice, we can't really hear it accurately,
Right.
right?
Right.
Mm.
So
you
we
need an
never.
external thing.
And how do we know what we see is really there? Because our eyes are operating with light and things like
Well,
that. So how do we know?
That gets back to the idea that we were talking about earlier about the fact that art is
Mm.
something that you look at, it triggers something in you
Right.
Mhm.
that kind of runs through you, and you create meaning of that. So, and the issue, the question was back, in the kitchen,
Yeah.
does the artist have intent, and does that intent have anything to do with the perceiver?
Mm.
Right? I mean,
Well, see, I've had some weird. I'm sorry. Let me
No,
just.
go ahead.
I've had some weird experiences because I've been. I'm a writer and musician and video creator. Studied acting, into
Mhm.
all the arts, kind of, sort of. And I've had the experience of creating stuff, and it doesn't even seem to come from me. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've had that. Like,
Mhm.
for example, I wrote a song, and it just seemed to come to me. Like it
Oh,
just
yeah.
seemed like it came from somewhere out there.
Mhm.
And so I created this song, and I actually, it was so weird. Like it just came. It would just seem so outside of me that
Mhm.
I thought maybe I stole it. So I went around playing it for all my friends and saying, have you heard this song before? Is this like a song you've heard on the radio? Like weird? And all my friends said, nope, it's your original song. But I needed to play it for other people to find out if it was my own. Because
Mhm.
like for a very long time, I thought I must have stolen this song. Like I must have heard it somewhere.
Mhm.
Because it really didn't come from me. It was the weirdest thing. And when I made a documentary about homelessness, and it was the same kind of thing. Like I was going to a cable access station and I put it all together. And one day I just kind of looked at it and I thought, wow, I put together this documentary. Like, I don't know how to make a documentary. Like it just, how did I even do that? And the song that I wrote, that song fit perfectly, like into it. Like, and it was like this weird supernatural, like, oh, I was meant to do this.
Right. Well,
I don't know. Have you guys had that experience?
I
Don't say no.
well,
No, I've never had that. You're the only one.
I definitely understand what you mean, and I think the artists, we're more like fulcrums for things to happen. Like things happen through us, not necessarily from us.
Mhm.
And it's all the stuff that you put into yourself to make whatever the filter that you are possible. Right? Like we don't know where thoughts come from. Like scientifically, we're not sure. You know what I mean? You can damage a part of your brain and that can limit some of your ability to access some of your motor function, stuff like that. But you can retrain yourself to then, I don't know, reroute the brain and you'll be fine.
Right.
So you're actually more of an antenna. So you pick up on stuff, right? And I think that goes beyond art, obviously. That goes into what we might call the supernatural, whatever the case may be. So sometimes we get inspiration from things outside of what we would normally call ourselves.
Mhm.
But I think it's very natural, not supernatural, honestly.
Really?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
think
that's
it comes-
interesting.
Well, I think all of that stuff is the natural way that we function. We call it supernatural because we've been taught a limited
right.
perspective.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
What do
Like
you
what
think
somebody might call an angel
Mhm.
is just, I don't know, maybe an ancestor in another culture, and that's how they operate.
So you don't think there's like some supernatural like muse or some force of nature that kind of runs through all things that makes us do things, or do you think it's just all us then? You think it's all like
Use the
maybe-
force.
I think what you're saying is accurate. I would say that my perspective on it is that they're not separate things. that you are the supernatural force doing the thing. There's never been a separation between you
Well,
and it.
it's like mind body.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like we make all these distinctions about, you know, we basically, you know, fragment ourselves into these components and then, you know, deal with the component as if it's somehow not connected to anything else. And that's something that we tend to do.
Agreed.
That I don't think is I'm not sure if it's that beneficial in the
It's
end.
a Western centric part of the mind. It's us fighting against nature, but we are nature. We're not separate from it.
It's definitely the whole idea of dominance over nature. All of that sort of stuff is like missing the point.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like we are it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it, because I feel like the thing that came through you that felt different from you was actually just you being in alignment with something that you were supposed to be doing.
But isn't that more egocentric to think that? Because then you're saying it's just all about you.
It's not all about you. You're the fault. It could, how you did the thing, I couldn't have done it. It wouldn't have been how I did it. It came out through you, through your experience, and all the stuff that was delivered it's kind of from your perspective.
Yeah, it's like basically what's happening is like, you know, you're pouring this water into you, the pitcher, and whatever else is in there from your experiences is going to mix in with that water and create a particular beverage.
Yep.
Okay, that's an interesting.
I like the analogy.
You know, I mean, basically that's, you know, so it may be that the inspiration is coming from outside of you, but whatever it is that you're taking in, that stimulus that's going in, is being manipulated by your entire history, your whole experience, and what comes back out is not what went in.
Yeah, it was just really strange because it just felt like I didn't write it, even though I did write it. But it really felt like something was guiding me, was making me. You know what I mean?
In all honesty, it probably was, but it happened through you for a reason. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the person next to you. It was you. So if it was if there was a person who was like, if I had to make a song, who would I choose to go through to do it? Mary. That's what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, but I mean,
there's something to that.
You know what I mean? Like, have you guys ever had that kind of?
Yeah, you get it in all the creative endeavors. I mean, you basically are the same. You get into a place.
Yeah, a flow.
This place where you're not necessarily directing it.
Yeah.
You know, but
it's like this muse.
And you're just, and that's where the difference between creation and discovery. I don't think there is a difference. I think that in the creative process, the thing that makes it so exciting is discovery. Is that you're surprising yourself. You don't know what's going to come through, and because even though you can see the liquid being poured into that pitcher, what comes out the other side is not something that went in. There's something else. You are. It is egocentric in the sense that you are adding something to it.
Yeah.
Even though it's coming through you, right? So you know you basically have to credit both.
Yeah.
Right.
And I believe balance in all things is necessary. Like your ego has to exist, or you don't.
Yeah.
Simple, but you can't. There's a fine line between having so much ego that everything is about you,
right,
or not enough ego where nothing is about you, and it's just like.
Yeah. Both of those are kind of like pitfalls that are really dangerous in many ways. You know, both to you and others.
Correct.
It's like
especially if you're orange.
Especially if you're orange.
Yeah.
Orange tinted.
I think there needs to be a support group for orange people.
I think so.
So you guys don't believe in God then, as far as like this?
You mean the old white guy on the golden throne,
or just even a spiritual force that's outside of us?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's not the same as God.
Well, I mean, do you believe in sort of a? Well, I mean, it could be. You know, like a God as a spiritual force of love.
No, he's an old white guy on a throne.
No, God is a woman, actually.
It's a black woman. Haven't you heard?
God's a woman. Thank you very much. And it's not me, because if it were,
see, I mean,
but
that's the point. Is that these are all representations of the idea that there is something that is. I mean, it's like this, to envision it as a superhuman is ridiculous. I mean, I just think that's utter garbage.
I think
that it's more like, you know, I think George Lucas probably had a better take on it, right? In the sense of the Force.
The Force, right.
Right? Of the idea that there is a natural, you know, energy everywhere. It's the idea of the ether.
Yeah.
Right? It's like there's no such thing as empty space.
Right, correct.
Right? That there is activity happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And that in itself, I mean, does that have to be human centric?
No.
Does that have to be represented like that?
Yeah, and you know what? I'd also think to add on to that, because I think consciousness is really like the linchpin to make all this stuff work. Like there's the energy exists, and then awareness is when, I don't know, certain levels of energy overlap to the point where it can become sentient in a way that we're sentient, right? So, and there's levels of that. So like, even if we were to have some interaction with some consciousness that I know we could communicate with, that wouldn't be God in and of itself, because I think God is a little bit of everything. Like, I think everything is made of God. That's how I would like.
But you could potentially interpret it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
See, that which goes back to the Incas. Right. I mean, where you suddenly have, you know, where you have you know, some kind of force entity thing that is, you know, beyond our particular understanding of everything. And what does it become? It becomes, you know, a God. I mean, what you know, I mean, it's fascinating that, you know, if it's outside of our experience, it's supernatural.
Right. But our experience of our experience is even kind of limited, because we don't we have 3 rods and cones, so we only see those 3 colors, and then all those colors that those things made. But that spectrum is way wider than that. Oh yeah. You know, and there are animals that have, you know, triple
infrared, UV.
So I couldn't even imagine what they're actually seeing that we just don't pick up on, right? And there's a physicality to what we've I don't know become or taken granted for. Like, this is tables are solid. We see what we see, but there's more stuff in this room than we are capable of picking up right now.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And in that space, we start getting into the, I don't know what this is. And then that gets weird for us. So we label it as supernatural, but it's always been there. It's just, we don't know how to perceive it yet.
So are there ghosts?
Are there ghosts?
Yeah, my house is haunted, definitely.
Oh, it is?
Oh yeah, all life facts.
Are there you mean ghosts in the terms of dead people? Or that are spirits, like hanging around,
or spirits, or just
spirits,
scary spirits, positive spirits.
I mean, you know, that again, that there's I mean, you can look at a number of you know, cultures that have very clearly defined an entire hierarchy of spirits, right? And again, this becomes more about being able to
classify,
classify and compartmentalize ideas and you know, primitive forces in ways in which they get, you know, anthropomorphized.
Yeah, I have an idea to throw out to you guys.
Yeah,
and it's that the categorization idea. So things happen, and the one thing our brain is good for doing is understanding what's or conceptualizing what's actually happening in front of us. It may not mechanically understand what's happening, but it goes, okay, this is happening, so I'm attaching what I do know and what I can understand and making a definition for it. You know, like if you tell a kid, if you put your tooth under the pillow, a fairy will come, tooth fairy, take that, give you money for it, right? The kid goes to sleep, puts the tooth there, gets a quarter. So the result is the same. That's not mechanically what's happening, but it doesn't matter because the result is still the same. So I think a lot of the stuff that we label is that. You could call it whatever you want to call it. The result's still the same, but mechanically we don't fully understand what's actually happening. But we had to, I don't know, give it some definition so we could even talk about it.
Well, then we create meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean that's what we do best, is we create meaning. So if there wasn't a God, we'd create one. You know, I mean, that's you know, and same thing. And again, with artwork, when we're looking at a piece of art, right, is the artwork is speaking to you. Well, you know, the artwork is triggering you in some way, and something's happening in your head, and you're creating meaning about what you're looking at, about the object, right? Now, whether the artist intended that or not, it's almost doesn't matter, you know, because you're still creating that meaning, and you still have a response to this object, right? And so, and the same thing with, like I said, we'll make gods if we don't have them. I mean, I don't think
Every culture seems to do that.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I mean, and they come in all sorts of flavors and styles and forms and
right.
You
and
know,
then the funny thing too is, like you're saying, the idea of even the word God as we understand it may not translate into other people's cultures.
No.
Like in Western culture, you say God, you mean the guy at the top of the ladder. In another culture, they'd be like, oh yeah, we have a bunch of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that polytheism as opposed to right.
And none of them are all
monotheism.
perfect. None of them are all powerful, and most of them aren't perfect. But you know, that God, he grows our radishes.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah, the Greek gods. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Boy, they were crazed. You know, they were murderous. They were
the projection of all of the human experience.
Yeah. You know, and they were as real as the Christian God in the end. Why not?
I mean, it's the power of people's perception. It's one of the things I like about Christianity in general is that there's a lot of like really deep metaphysical stuff if you actually like take the time out to kind of like decipher. Part of the problem is that you could not take it that way and take it literally, and it gets kind of weird, real quick. So,
well, because people are making meaning,
yeah.
right? So there's agenda behind that.
Yeah,
right?
I also think it's a lack of understanding sometimes. It's like if the original intention was good, let's just say it was for the sake of argument, but this was written at a college level and a 5-year-old read it, he's not going to get the same thing out of it.
Well, look at, even in the Bible there, God starts out as a homicidal maniac.
Is a little nuts.
He's going to kill everybody.
That's
I'm going to just slay you all.
I'm not very happy.
And by the time we get to the New Testament, he's all lovey-dovey.
Very true.
Well, that's because human beings do all kinds of bad things. And
yeah, they were all, right. The reflection, that gods are a reflection of us. Right.
I mean,
you can,
That's the interesting part too. That's because the Old Testament, which is basically just the Torah. Their ideas. There's a train of thought. The Gnostics believe that the God that presents himself in the Bible isn't actually the God that they think that they're dealing with, which is why they have all the experiences they have. And that the main thing that they're talking to or channeling, they call it the demiurge. And the actual God, the thing that they think they're talking to, his name is Sophia. It's female versus male energy. The male energetic thing that they're talking to is the one that wants all the praise and is very jealous because it wants to be whole, but the humans don't know any different. So it demands a bunch of stuff of them, like a sacrifice, prove you love me, do all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
And by the time we get to the second version of it, we've created the Trinity and they've balanced out. And now we're getting the chilled out, just love each other God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So God has, that, the idea that the Christian God, for instance, is immutable. It doesn't look that way in the Bible.
Yeah.
It looks like he kind of grew up by the time he got to the Old Testament.
We did, and it definitely a lot of those writings had to get filtered through a person to actually write them. So they're not even entirely accurate just as far as our translation.
Well, listen, we're still discovering, stuff that was never. I mean, the canon was created between 300 and 600, and it was basically, they had all the writings. Out of all those writings, only a small percentage in the end made it into the canon, and and that was all politically motivated. Right, and that's
like the new James version was in like 1611 or something like that. Like William Shakespeare was alive when the new
King James version was created.
Yeah, it's not that long ago. And there's other books too.
Like, the Book of Judas. There's a bunch of them.
They just aren't in there.
Oh, completely.
The Book of Enoch. Have you ever read the Book of Enoch?
I haven't read it. I've read about it.
That thing is crazy.
Is it?
Really?
It is. Yeah. There's straight up like in our language, we'd be like, oh, this is alien abduction. This is very strange.
Really?
Yeah, that whole book is strange. There's another book written by what would have been, I guess, Jesus' brothers and sisters, because Mary and Joseph had kids after him.
Right.
But those aren't in the Bible because they talked about Jesus as like a person.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really fit the narrative.
Again, and this was it was created as a political vehicle in the end
to control people.
The church was done. Yeah, sociologically, the church was major part of civilizing human beings, and in the process, that was social control was really important.
So, should we write a book to add to the Bible? Maybe. That's something we could do.
There is a guy by the name of Killer Mike who is used to rap.
Killer Mike, I love it.
Great guy.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite people because as a social activist, speaker, super brilliant guy. He actually produced a show called Trigger Warning, and was having a discussion kind of like this and decided he was going to start his own religion.
That's cool.
This concludes the cable access version of the Indy Art Show. Now
Great.
all of our questions have been answered.